So I'm going to give you the broad contours of an idea that could become a news event, a TV show, a political movement, a religious movement, a joke, a comic book. I think there are many different applications for this. But for now, I think it'll have to settle for being just like a little YouTube video. The idea is broadly about the gap that I think exists between the realm of current events and the realm of what I'm going to call ontological speculations. By which I mean that we have all of these views about the nature of reality that are philosophical or religious or scientific, and they often seem to go out of the window when we start talking about the events of the day, the week, or the month. So you may have a long conversation with somebody where they explain to you their view of reality that may be rooted, let's say, in Buddhism, which postulates that this whole world is kind of illusory and that there is no self, that the idea of self is just that. It's an idea, a conception, an illusion, and everything is kind of fluid, and suffering comes from aversion and craving and all that kind of thing. And then you mention, let's say, Donald Trump to them, and suddenly this person who they've never seen becomes a very solid kind of entity for them that immediately causes strong feelings of aversion. And it's like you're talking to a different person. They have this philosophical view of the world that does not translate into their politics or their way of relating to politics even. I'm going to use the simulation theory to illustrate the idea, but I could have used something else. It's really a variable here. So instead of the simulation theory, I can use panpsychism or UFOs or the implications of the psychedelic experience or quantum physics, Platonism, conspiracy theories of different sort, views from various traditional religions. Many ideas can stand in its place, but I'll use the simulation theory for now for a bunch of reasons. A, it's become very popular in the last couple of decades. B, it has proponents in different influential parts of the society. And C, it is this pretty broad idea. It's, as I said, it's become popular in the last couple of decades, and it's in its current form hasn't been formulated before, the existence of computers, but you can find very similar ideas in ancient Greece, in ancient China, in India, worded differently, but substantially very similar. So at the end of the 20th century, when the movie The Matrix came out, this view of the world as a computer simulation was a novel idea for most of the people. That's one of the reasons it was such a good premise for an action sci-fi kind of movie. A loopy, trippy kind of thing to wrap the narrative around. Since then, though, it's become so popular that you can make like jokes and references to the idea without explaining it at all. Like if you say the simulation, a lot of people know exactly what you're talking about, and there's no need to explain this narrative. It has advocates in academia. You can look at somebody like Nick Bostrom, who's at Oxford and who's advocated for this idea. In the media, look at somebody like Joe Rogan. And I'm going to single out Elon Musk here too, because he seems to actually believe in this worldview, or at least entertain it very seriously. And at the same time, he is a mover, right? He influences our consensus shared physical reality very obviously. Like there are these electric cars that are on the roads, and it's because of him. There are these rockets that go into space, and it's because of him. Now, it's kind of funny because there are some people who maintain that space itself is fake. That's an idea that's way more fringe, but I would say kind of is adjacent to the simulation hypothesis. And then it's worth saying that Musk is also doing all this work in artificial intelligence, and more importantly, maybe the interface between humans and computers. And when he was asked by Lex Friedman, what would he ask an AI if real AI was created, he paused for like 10 seconds and then replied, what is outside the simulation? For many people, I would say like below the age of 35, this view of the world as a computer simulation is more relatable than the figure of Christ. And then the figure of Christ itself is not divorced from this narrative completely either, because One of the schools of thought in early Christianity, what we call Gnosticism, had very similar ideas. Obviously, the words AI and computer simulations are not present in their ancient texts, but they did maintain that our reality is not the real deal. And they thought that we are trapped in this world that was created by a flawed architect who doesn't know his own nature or origin. Now, they call that entity the demiurge, which means the architect. But if they were writing today, they could have replaced that word with programmer, because that description, that string of words, a flawed architect who doesn't know his own nature or origin, that describes a computer programmer perfectly well. And so you have all of these artists, philosophers, podcasters, engineers, psychonauts, CEOs of different corporations, all talking about this. And then there's a group of people who you never hear talking about this, which is the блядь, which is the politicians. So my proposal here is, let's take this issue, this whole kind of crux of issues, a whole field of ideas, and bring them into the political realm, and then see what that does to this set of ideas about the world as simulation and to the field of politics, like how it reacts. How do we do that? Well, I don't know exactly how official means of communication between the populace and the politicians work in America, but I have heard this phrase in political ads and in movies: write your senator or call your senator. You may want to do that. So address like your representative and say, listen, I understand that the election is very important, but there's this guy at Oxford, and then there's a guy who launches rockets, and these media personalities. And frankly, people I know, it's just a very popular idea that reality is fake. And if that is true, it makes it kind of hard for me to focus on Trump and Biden right now. So I just want to hear your stance on this. What do you think? Is that something that comes up at meetings? Do you have like reports from the intelligence services about the nature of reality? Do you suspect anything like that yourself? Or do you maintain that this is all silly? These people should not be listened to. Reality is real. Donald Trump is a real person. There's nothing suspicious about him in terms of his like ontological status. Joe Biden is alive. He's a real person too. And the contest between these two is what we really should be focusing on right now. This is the prime issue of the day, and we shouldn't be thinking about whether the world is real. See whether there is a response and what kind of response that is. Then you could go the route of mixing political action with performative arts, let's say. By which I mean, just organize a rally in your town. Gather some people in the main square and say a thing. You can target your message at the political actors, just like I said before. Demand that your representatives just address the issue. Is reality real? Or maybe a more interesting way to go about this is to target the message at the programmers or whatever entities are out there outside the simulation. Right? So you can demand that the glitches that seem especially abundant this year be fixed before 2021 rolls around. When the pandemic just started, I heard a guy make this joke that the lockdowns are nothing to worry about and the pandemic is nothing to worry about, because what the pandemic really is just an update of the simulation. The whole reality needs to be updated, and the lockdowns are there to make sure that people stay at home because it demands more computing power to update reality when all of this awareness is spread throughout it. So you can demand that we roll back to the 2019 version, which seemed to be much more stable than the 2020 version. Or, release the patches just before this new year, fix all of this stuff. Or you can get more ambitious and demand access to the reality outside the simulation. Or the opposite, be more humble and say, listen, we're not demanding anything. We're not even sure that you are out there, but we are getting suspicious about this reality of ours, and there are these theories that there are programmers, creators outside of our world, and we would like to get in touch. I mean, imagine if you are a programmer, if you created some virtual world online and you fill it with all of these NPCs, these bots and characters, and they go about their lives and you watch the civilizations form and fall, and then you start seeing these groups of people gather together, look into the camera and go, we have the strong suspicion that you, the computer programmer, is looking at us right now. And we want to say that this reality has become weird and kind of boring, not very compelling, and all of the games that you built into it we're not that interested in them anymore. So could you just talk to us? Could you explain to you what you think about the nature of our world? Is there a purpose to it? Is it a game? Is it some kind of a testing environment where you want to see intelligence emerge? Or what the hell is it? What do you want? Maybe just fucking wave at us. Do something, because we're not sure what to do anymore. And there can be a million other ways to go about this, but that is the premise. That is the basics of the idea. Take some kind of a worldview that has points about what reality itself is, and then bring it to a politician or to a crowd of activists, or not even activists, like form a little movement and see what kind of additional shades of color it can bring to the idea, to that worldview, in this case, the simulation theory, and what it does to politics, how the political world reacts to this attempt to situate it within a bigger issue of like what life is.